Okay, so do either of you want to share some items that you need to study and as well as descriptors that we addressed?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share since this is kind of like what I try to learn for my work as well. So yeah. So we went ahead and talked about the standards, and we basically said that it's anything in written language that we learned about. So that included phonological and phonemic awareness, alphabetic principle, and literacy development and practice. So this also included just helping students understand phonological approaches, I guess, to learning language, as well as identifying written language with verbal language and I guess putting it together. So one thing that I think that I still need to work on is the alphabetic principle, which is helping students understand, I'm sorry, which is helping students understand printed words and how they consist of graphic representations that relate to sounds of spoken language. This is something that I tend to struggle with seeing in the perspective of my students, especially since they come from Asian countries. A lot of the times they don't understand that there are certain, um, I guess, certain letters in the language that make a certain sound. I don't know how to explain it. It's just something that I really need to practice and study up on and how to teach for ESL, because at times I think my students are learning, but it turns out they're just kind of like parroting sounds, or
Mm-hmm.
they're saying a word that they think they've seen before, but they're not
Mm-hmm.
able to comprehend each letter or each sound individually. So yeah.
Yes, so great. So thanks, Deanna, for sharing that, and all those things that you talked about, the alphabetic principle and all of that. Those were on the 291 core exam, and so they're now going to be on the science of teaching and reading exam. And so so people, your students that are coming from like those Asian languages, a lot of them may have like their languages are built, it's not on the alphabetic principle, it's based on like oh my gosh, can't think of the word.
I
Like
know that's
Spanish, for example, is like syllables, like
mhm.
that's like part of it, but they only have like one sound. And then there's other I know like with some of the languages, it's like a symbol may stand for like uh uh a couple of like sounds, you know what I mean? Like it's not just like one letter represents like one sound. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
and I also wanted to point out, I don't know what this would fall under. So for example, my students from China, if they write out the word teacher in Chinese, it's Lao Shi when you say it, but when you write it out, it looks something like Lao Shi. So they'll say it like this, and you kind of, I guess, as a teacher, not understanding their language, you kind of hear it and you're like, what are they trying to say? So I'm trying to figure out what that would be, like differentiating the sounds to say it in the way that a native speaker says it as compared to how they say it translated directly. I hope
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense.
I think so. I think so. Yeah, I think it's just something that has to be taught, like explicitly taught. That's
Mhm.
unfortunately, yeah, with language, it's a lot, and it's for us here in the U.S., a lot of us, fortunately, we're here in the border city, so we also encounter Spanish a lot, but when you only look at that type of language, I know for me, when I was first learning about it, I was kind of like, oh, well, everybody, every language is like based on alphabetic principle. And then in learning, I was like, oh my gosh, like now I understand, why certain languages are written a certain way, or why, we have like 26 letters and they may have like this insane, amount of symbols, right? Infinite amount of symbols practically to form their language. So yeah, it's a lot to learn. Okay. Now my AirPod's not loading. It's just not my day. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and try a couple of questions. So these are some sample questions for you. So go ahead and pick your character. Easy questions, hard questions.
They were fairly easy, I think.
Okay, yeah, I thought so too. I thought that those questions were pretty easy. All right. Okay. So the next thing we have here is word analysis. And so word analysis is going to refer to how children approach written words and decode them to make meaning. So I think I missed, oh, there we go. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I missed this slide. So competency 2 is going to deal with word analysis and identification skills. And so for this one, it's to help students to read and understand what they're reading. And so this is going to allow you to provide opportunities for students to practice and improve those skills. Okay, so word analysis and identification. Word analysis and identification. Hi, Lisa.
I'm back, ladies. Sorry, I was missing no host.
That's okay.
I was like, oh, I got
No worries, no worries. Okay, so so when we talk about word analysis, this is how students are going to look at words that are written down, right, and learn how to decode them to make meaning. And so this was something that I found, I guess, interesting as well, because when I was, working with my son, I'm trying to get him to sound out the letters, but he's just like, initially he was just like throwing out random words, like he was just trying to guess what the word was. So he wasn't making the connection that the sounds, that the letters made sounds and the sounds made words, right? He wasn't making that connection. And so that's something that we need to make sure that we're working on with our students. So now, right, after we've been working on this for a while, now he's understanding how that works. And so this is something that should be practiced daily in class. And so children need to be taught this so that they can pick up words very quickly. And so the reason that they need to do that is because if they can see words and right away see, if they're able to read them very quickly, then they're able to be able to comprehend the information better. And so research shows that fluent word identification has to occur before children can actually comprehend, which makes sense, right? If you give something to a student to read, and if the student is still working on trying to sound out the letters to form a word, then they're not focusing on what it is that's actually being said. So students that are struggling with reading, right? If they just can't, make the words, then they're not comprehending anything because they're focusing all of their time and energy and brain power, right, on just putting together those words to read. And so to help students with word recognition, there's a couple of different ways that you can teach these to students. So the first thing that happens is going to be dealing with that sight vocabulary and phonics. And so those sight words, I know initially when I heard about sight words, I was like, why are we teaching sight words if we want students to understand phonics and how they're put together? But some of these sight words they're words that kids are going to see all the time, right? And some of them, they don't follow those typical phonics like sounds, right? So they can't just like sound them out in order to understand them. So if you just teach them how to memorize them, then when they see them and they encounter them, it'll be automatic. They'll know what it is. And so then they can, the phonics can be used for like the other words when it comes to reading. And so as students grow, their sight vocabulary is also going to increase. So this was also a misunderstanding I had. I thought there was like a list of sight words, right? But they may have a list, but again, as the kids get older, because they're going to be exposed to the words more often, they're going to start memorizing more words just by looking at them. So there's not going to be that process of having to sound out what the words actually are. They'll just learn them. And so when it comes to working with sight words, it's not only to have students be able to identify what they are, but it's also having students be able to spell them. So they should be able to do both of those things. And by doing that, we're also going to be working on their writing fluency. So it's not only them being able to read, but then we're going to be able to have the students actually write quicker. So some phonic generalizations are strategies that are used to introduce word recognition as well as decoding skills. And they don't always apply, but they're going to help in most cases so that when students are, starting to read, these rules can be followed. And for the most part, it's going to help them understand, how to read the words. So for example, my son, he's in kindergarten right now, and every day she plays a video that goes over the different sounds and these phonic generalizations. And so in the video, the girl says, E says E, and she does a hand movement. So she kind of like hits her legs, so E says E. And so they play it every single day. And even though I may think he's not paying attention, when I look at him, he's already getting that programmed in his brain. and he does the movements as well. So it's just these rules that will help students. So when they actually do start reading those more challenging words, they've already kind of got these rules kind of, you know, ingrained in their little brains. So these are just a couple of them here. Of course, there's a, you know, there's a whole list that you can look up. Okay, and so this video kind of goes over some of those rules, and I'm not going to play it because it's kind of boring, but in case you needed to look at the rules, you know, you can see a couple of these rules in here. Okay, so the next one is structural analysis. And so this is helping students understand that words are made up of word parts. And so if students can understand that you have word parts, right, then when it comes to them encountering new words that they've never seen before, if they can pick out those word parts, then they can also make meaning with them. And so with structural analysis, this is something that's going to happen as the kids get older, right? So like for my example, my son in kindergarten, he's not working on, you know, much structural analysis. For him, he's more kind of in like the sight word stage and looking at phonics. But as the kids get older, and I can't remember the grade level, but I want to say probably around 4th grade is where this is going to start to happen a lot more. You're going to have students, you're going to be teaching students that you have these base words and you've got prefixes and suffixes and affixes, and that they all have different meanings. And so morphemes, like we mentioned earlier, are going to be those smallest units of meanings. So like I said, morpheme would be the base word, the affix, the prefix, and all that. And so they're going to come, a lot of these words from the English language come from different languages. And so when we come to these morphemes, they're coming from Greek and Latin a lot of the time. And so those are they're going to represent the same meanings, regardless of how, you know, where it is used in the word. So for example, pre always means before, right? And anti always means against. So when I put these in front of words, right, I can understand what those bigger words mean. And so that's something that you teach students. Then there's also inflectional morphemes. So these are going to happen in the final position of a word, and they're typically going to follow derivational morphemes. So for example, a short plural is just adding an S. So like in 2 dogs or 5 pins, right? I add an S, that makes plural. A long plural would be when you add an ES at the end, such as in churches or in dishes. And then there's going to be regular past tense, right? Such as ED at the end. And so she jumped high. And of course, there's a whole bunch of other ones, right? But it's just kind of talking about those things that are added on to the end of the word and what it is that they mean. Okay, and then the next one will be clues, right? So when we're teaching students to be able to read, they've got to understand that there are sometimes going to be clues that are going to help them out. So you know, in the younger grades, the context clues may be pictures, right? So when they're reading you know, and there's a lot of picture books, right, for the little kids. So that way the students maybe have a small amount of words, but in the picture, they're also able to gain meaning. So if they're not quite sure what the words mean, it's kind of like, you know, matching, well, does this word make sense? Or, you know, does that word make sense? Then there's going to be semantic clues. So that's when students think about what the meaning might be, right, based on what makes sense. And so again, you may have pictures that may help, or with other parts of the reading, you know, as kids get older, they're going to try to, you know, maybe figure out what might be there. And so what teachers can do is help them by activating that prior knowledge. So again, for example, I'm like, my kids' teachers are pretty great. So when they're about to read a book, before they even read the book, they're gonna talk about, you know, okay, so let's look at the cover. So, you know, it's got a picture of a bird on it. So what do you guys know about birds? You know, what are some questions that you might wonder about birds? And so by having the kids kind of bring in that prior knowledge, then when they start reading it, the kids are already kind of expecting to find certain words in there. And then there's synecdoche clues. So this would be when students look at the order of the words, right? So if they understand how the English language is formed by looking at the order of the words, then they can figure out what type of word may be able to fit in there. And again, these synecdoche clues will be, you know, as the kids get older in age. So this is not necessarily, you know, something that you'll be teaching like in kindergarten. And so for all of these different types of clues, they're going to kind of grow and change in terms of what students will use as clues as they get older in grade level. So for example, again, in the synecdoche clues, if you have this sentence here, dogs are blank, students are going to believe that it's either an adjective or a noun that's missing. So that's going to kind of help them figure out, again, what the word might be. Now, some challenges that may occur with comprehension with the English language, right? It's a challenging language. So some things are such as homophones. And so these are words that sound the same, but are spelled differently and have different meanings. So the word blue and the word blue, right? So when students hear these words, they may think one definition versus the other. So there may be confusion there. Here and here, right? Then there's homographs, and these are spelled the same, but have more than one pronunciation as well as a different meaning. So for example, this word here, I could say it's a bow, right? So I have like a bow on my head, or it means to bow, right? So again, when a student is seeing this word, they may only know one pronunciation and one definition. So that may cause issues with them understanding what they're reading. And then the last one is going to be compound words. So again, as kids get older, if you're able to teach them, some of these analysis skills, then they may be able to make some, maybe understand what those compound words are. But when you put two independent words together and you get a new word, that may cause issues because, for example, if we think of a basket and a ball, right? A student may literally think a basket, right? Like you put, stuff inside of, and you may think of just a regular ball. And so when they read basketball, they're thinking of those two separate things. So those are comprehension things that students will work on. As they get older, they'll learn how to, kind of differentiate and understand those. All right, so we're going to go ahead and try this again for competency 2 this time. So you're going back to that preparation manual. And now we're taking a look at competency 2. And you're going to go ahead and look at the descriptors that we've addressed. And I know both of you, fortunately, I've got both of you here. So you may have some resources that you might be able to share for this section. So if you have any ideas or resources that you've seen or used, go ahead and share those with your partner. So I'll give you 5 minutes to do that as
So Ms. Host, we were making sure we were looking at the right competency or whatever. And so we kind of looked at the letter E using dictionaries. I told Deanna that I think for all of the letters, we've kind of gone through a little bit of each section, but the dictionary part, we really didn't highlight too much on. But all the other ones, I mean, like the vowel, all of that, I think it falls under.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to talk a little bit about dictionaries in a little bit. Did you, in terms of resources, did you all have any resources to share?
I know Deanna had a lot of resources and the time got cut off. So I don't know if Deanna, if you want to share that.
Yeah, I can go ahead and share this. All right, thank you. So for resources, as far as teaching and even just understanding the context, there was one that I use a lot, which is called Tech for Teach. Tech for Teach. And it's basically technology for language teaching. And when you go into it more, you actually get experienced teacher feedback, and you can even get access to module and assignments. There's one also called Teachers for Teachers. They have very similar names like that. And then also a more recent one that I came across is actually Google Slides that are offered privately via my company and then other ESL companies, which I think they share them publicly as well. So with those slides, you can get access to things like props or competencies that they use internationally, including ways to teach certain elements that may be taught differently elsewhere, including things like math, like multiplication, for example. So yeah, those are very accessible. And while I can't really name the names, they come through forms like via Google Docs or PowerPoint slides. So things like that.
Great, thanks for sharing, Deanna. And thank you for pointing that out to Lisa about the items that we didn't talk about.
Miss Tina, so like Anna, I don't know if we're talking about the teachers pay teachers, because
Teachers
I've
pay
used that
teachers.
before,
Mhm.
and yeah, is that the one you were talking about?
Yes, it's that one. And when I get the names for everything else, I'll go ahead and share, but I have like a whole list of it upstairs that I can't get to right now. So
Okay, no
yeah.
worries. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
Teachers Pay
actually,
Teachers has they've got some great ideas. Just, be wary that, people from all over the country can put stuff on there. And so not everything may necessarily be aligned with what we're doing in Texas. So just, caveat, keep that in mind.
Good to know.
yeah, because I know that really helped me the first year that I taught Miss Tina, but I did notice like, oh wait, this isn't what we're learning over here. Wait, this isn't. But it was, I mean, there was a lot of resources that were helping me.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah, but
thank
thank you for that one. I was trying to name it off the top of my head. I couldn't get it. So thank you.
Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is competency 3, and this one's dealing with reading fluency. With this one, the teacher understands the importance of fluency for reading comprehension and provides opportunities for students to improve their reading fluency. Again, what we talked about and we mentioned earlier, right, is that students have to understand how to like decode before they can do that comprehension. Okay, so what reading fluency means is it's the ability to decode words quickly and accurately, to read and with appropriate word stress, pitch, and intonation, right? So it's not just students just, reading the words, but also understanding how speech works. And so that way they can say the words with the right emphasis and all that. And so with reading fluency, it's going to require automaticity, which is the quick and accurate recognition of letters, words, and language conventions. So this requires a lot of practice. Again, this is something that students should be doing like every day in class, is working on increasing their fluency. And I know sometimes when we hear fluency, we think, oh, well, as long as the student can read, like so many words per minute, they're fine. But it's more than that, right? It's also making sure that they are, saying things the right way, stopping with the period, it's doing all that. It's not just being able to read a word. Again, this is a prerequisite to comprehension. So students must have fluency for language comprehension to happen. So like we mentioned that earlier, if students are spending a lot of time trying to sound out the words, then they're not picking up, they're not comprehending anything. So they're just focusing on decoding the language instead of actually understanding what it is that they're reading about. So in class, when teachers are having students read aloud to the class, what a teacher is actually checking for is fluency. They're just seeing if the students can actually read what they're saying. But if the teacher asks a student a question, and this may have happened to you, you had to read in class, right? You get nervous because you have to read and you focus on just making sure you're reading. But if they actually ask you a question about what you read, you're going to have to go back and read it again. When you are, asking a student a question about something that they just read, then that's testing comprehension. So we got to, make sure that we are testing for the right thing. Okay. And again, stop me if I'm going too fast. So when it comes to teaching fluency, these are some tools that we can do in the classroom. And again, this is why you may see this being done, right? So one of those things is reading something repeatedly. So for example, my son, again, in kindergarten, they read the same story in his English class Monday through Friday. So every week he'll have a new book, but they'll read it again and again and again and again. And it's just to, again, expose the students to those words and how to read those words, right? And what that should sound like, so that they understand how all of that works. Choral reading, this is when you put students together in a group. And so maybe you have a group of 2 to 3 kids together and they're going to read the book, but they're all going to read it together at the same time. And so that's going to help students practice, saying those things together. So maybe the teacher will say the sentence and maybe the whole class will read the sentence like right after her or with her. So that's, everybody's doing it all together to practice. Then you could pair students up. And so you may pair up a proficient reader with a struggling reader. So the proficient reader may help the struggling reader, by helping them out, maybe with sounding out words or with intonation or anything like that. But the the struggling reader will hear the proficient reader reading so that they understand how, what it's supposed to actually sound like. And of course, as all of these things are going to be done in the elementary grades, right? And the type of text that they're reading may differ, right? So the text may be a little bit more challenging as they get older. Other things that are out there are interactive digital programs. So I know, for example, at Socorro District, they use iStation. So my son has to get on iStation. Initially, he was getting on like every day, but now he's only getting on like twice a week. And so the program actually helps provide individual support. So when he was having issues with like blending sounds together, it would, repeatedly go over that blending until he was able to move on to like the next step. So it works on students actually making those connections with words and sounds, but for every kid, it's different, right? You may have kids that are at different levels. Something that you also see happening in the elementary schools is going to be silent sustained reading. And this is actually something that's going to guide students to read silently for 20 minutes a day. And so there's actually, research that shows that this is going to build fluency. All you need is 20 minutes a day. And of course, as the kids get older, their type of book that they're reading is going to change. But it's just having students, kind of focus and working on just, reading something. And a lot of times with silent sustained reading, it may be a book of their choice, right? So something that the kids are interested in so that they're more likely to pay attention to it. And of course, there's a whole bunch of other tools out there, but these are kind of like the main ones that you're going to see. And I just kind of wanted to go over how those work with fluency. So when it comes to the expectation of fluency, when kids are small, right? So like, for example, my son right now, right? When you're reading something, you want to point to the words to help students understand that, what you're reading is actually, like a word is actually representing what you're actually saying, right? So they're able to kind of make those connections. But as students get older, like say, for example, I can't remember, 3rd or 4th grade, you should stop. Like there shouldn't be any more pointing because, right, students are going to start practicing reading with their finger to point. But once they get to those upper grades, right, 4th grade and on, if they're using their finger to point, it's actually going to slow down their fluency because they should be able to be reading a lot more words. And so the TEKS actually have a fluency number, right, a rate. So the TEKS state that a typical child in 1st grade should read about 60 words per minute, and the rate should increase about 10 words for every grade level. So you would just tack on 10 words every grade level, and that's what the fluency rate should be. And so they calculate that by counting the number of words read minus the errors. So if a student gets through 60 words, but they messed up 10 of them, then their fluency would actually be 50 words per minute. And so students in 4th grade should read independently with ease, finding no more than 1 in 20 words difficult. So they should be pretty fluent readers at that age. And this is something that should be assessed regularly and tracked. So there may be programs that do it, like such as iStation, or in some cases, you may have seen a teacher where the teacher tells a student to go ahead and read, and the teacher is marking down, how many words they wrote and crossing out maybe the words that they got wrong. And then they're doing a calculation to see where they're at in terms of fluency, okay? But being able to read so many words per minute is one aspect of fluency, but we also need to make sure that the students, the other aspect is making sure that students are reading with that correct intonation, inflection, and all of that so that it actually sounds like speech. Okay, and so this is something that you may need to work on with students, but this is it's a video, and I'm not gonna play it because we're kind of running low on time here. But it's basically telling kids not to read like a robot, right? So this is coming from oh my gosh, what is it called? Not Vocabulary. I can't remember. It's a website where they do fun videos like for school. But it's a cute way to help students understand that there's more to fluency than just being the fastest reader, because that's what some students may understand fluency actually means. All right, so let's go ahead and try some more sample questions based on these last 2 competencies that we covered. Not too bad.
A couple of them were very close for me. I was like, it's one or the other, so it was okay.
Yeah, same for me, Deanna. I felt like, okay, it can either be this one or this one.
All right. Okay. So we'll do the same thing. So we're going to go ahead and now you're going to take a look at competency 3, again, in the preparation manual. So looking at reading fluency, and then make sure, go over which descriptors we have addressed. And then what were some misconceptions you had about fluency before going through this section. So that's what you'll go ahead and talk about next. And I'm going to give you 4 minutes. Okay, ladies, I guess, Deanna, can you share with us what you talked about?
Yes, so Lisa and I were saying that this was probably the easiest competency. There was really no misconceptions that we could think of, and we've been practicing this for some time now, so a lot of it wasn't necessarily new, but it was nice to refresh on it.
Okay, good. That's good to hear. Thank you. Okay, so we've got 2 more competencies to get through. So the next one is competency 4. This one's dealing with reading comprehension and applications. So the teacher understands the importance of reading for understanding, knows the components and processes of reading comprehension, and teaches students strategies for improving their comprehension, including using a variety of texts and contexts. So for this one, let's see. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a quick little video here. This gave a good explanation.
For almost a century, researchers have argued over the question, how do children learn to read? But for the last few decades, the research has actually been pretty clear. Written language is a code. Certain combinations of letters predictably represent certain sounds. Teaching young kids how to crack the code is the most reliable way to make sure that they learn how to read words. This kind of instruction is called systematic phonics. Connecting printed letters on a page to written sounds isn't intuitive. While some young children may make those connections themselves, most don't. The research shows that explicit phonics instruction benefits early readers, but particularly those who struggle to read. That's because small strengths or deficits at the start of reading compound over time. Of course, there is more to reading than seeing a word on a page and pronouncing it out loud. Children need to make meaning out of the words they read. That means that they also need deep background and vocabulary knowledge. And eventually, they need to be able to recognize most words automatically and read connected text fluently. But knowing how to decode is an essential step in becoming a reader. If children can't decipher the precise words on the page, they'll never become fluent readers. In a systematic phonics program, teachers don't just address the letter-sound connections that students stumble over. They teach all of them in a sequence. And teachers explicitly tell students what sounds correspond to which letter patterns, rather than asking students to figure it out. 2 decades ago, the US government brought together a panel to evaluate reading research. The panel's report found that among students in kindergarten and 1st grade, phonics instruction led to improvements in decoding ability and reading comprehension across the board. Children at risk of developing future reading problems, children with disabilities, and children from all socioeconomic backgrounds all benefited. Neuroscience research has since confirmed that explicitly teaching these skills helps people learn how to read new languages more quickly. Of course, phonics instruction, like all teaching, can and should be differentiated to meet the needs of individual students. Once a student knows a sound or phonics skill, he should move on. Many early reading classrooms teach students strategies to identify a word by guessing, using context clues and pictures. Neuroscience studies have found that guessing is a much less efficient way to identify a new word. It's what struggling readers do, not proficient ones. Phonics is essential, but understanding the alphabetic code doesn't automatically make students good readers. There are 5 components of reading: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. A framework called the Simple View of Reading explains how comprehension works. It says that reading comprehension is the product of decoding ability and language comprehension. A student needs both good decoding and good language skills to understand what's on the page. If either one of those is low, then comprehension will be low as well. Many people point out that research shows that children who read more are better readers. That's true, but it's important to remember that those studies are correlational. It's unclear whether students become better readers because they read more, or whether good readers are just more likely to pick up books. To learn more, check out Education Week's ongoing series, Getting Reading Right.
Okay, and so a lot, well, not a lot, basically everything that's coming in these standards is all based on research. And that is, again, why the Science of Teaching and Reading exam has come about, because we want to make sure that all teachers understand that there is a science to it. Like there is a way that it should be done. And one of the things that you want to be aware of, that it's mentioned here, and it's going to be mentioned a lot in the Science of Teaching and Reading exam, is that systematic explicit instruction. And so it's being very purposeful with the way that you're teaching students and literally teaching them everything, like she said in the video. So when it comes to reading comprehension, what that means is it's the ability for students to actually understand what they read, right? So we've kind of talked about how there's, students have to work on language, right? So students should be understanding, they should be able to talk to each other and have those opportunities to work on speaking the language and hearing the language. And then we've also talked about how students have to understand how to make that connection with the text, forming the sounds and the sounds forming words and words having meaning. And then we've talked about how students have to have that fluency and be able to read, words quick enough so that there's not so much thought put into actually reading, doing the actual reading, but then they can actually reach this stage, which would be reading comprehension. So remember that precursor to comprehension is fluency. So if you have a student that is struggling in being able to read, then they're going to have big issues with comprehension, right? Because their focus is more on trying to put those words and sounds together. So there are a lot of factors that are going to affect students' reading comprehension. And so we're going to take a little bit more look at that. So the first thing that is going to be important for students being able to comprehend what they're reading has to do with the background knowledge. And so students that have rich prior knowledge, and a lot of this, unfortunately, sometimes comes to the socioeconomic status, of a family. For example, you may have a kid who, their family has a lot of money. And so maybe they travel and they go all over the world. And so they just have like this bigger schema, right? They've got all of these things that they have seen and experienced. Whereas someone that, is coming from a lower socioeconomic status, they may have only lived in their neighborhood. Like they may not have gone out of their little town or something. So they have less of that exposure. With that schema, right, when an author is actually writing a book, they may have an intended schema for students to, be bringing, to knowledge that they're bringing to the table to actually read, but students may have a different schema. And so that may be confusion. There may be confusion in understanding what the author is actually trying to say. So again, when we think of our English language learners, right, and again, a lot of times we always think of our students that speak Spanish, but this could be any English language learner, right? They may bring different experiences to the classroom. And so the teacher is going to have to work on building that background knowledge needed to understand whatever it is that you're reading. So as I mentioned, again, systematic explicit instruction, this is also referred to as a gradual release of responsibility. So we've already talked about that in our class, but for those of you that have not, that aren't in cohort 42, we didn't talk about it as much. And so with the gradual release of responsibility, there's the I do, the we do, and the you do. And that is super, super important when it comes to the science of teaching reading, right? And this ELAR instruction here. So the students can be guided to practice and apply specific strategies when reading. So when you're actually reading to the students, right, you are literally modeling what that thinking is going on in your brain, so that students can help to assess themselves when they're actually reading. So the teacher models those practices with the guided reading, and then when students are actually reading by themselves, then they should also, be practicing that on their own. And so again, the teacher has to continually reinforce these reading strategies, and they need to be taught explicitly. So it's not a matter of, okay, so what do you think? What do you guys think we should do next? Or what do you think we should happen? No, you literally tell them, this is what you should be thinking. This is how you should be doing it. And you give them that like steps, steps that they should be following in order to help them with the comprehension. Okay, so I was looking for a video that showed systematic explicit instruction, and I found this one, but it's math. Okay, so just understand that you would be doing this with, reading. Okay, so I got another little clip that we'll see it in a little bit too.
In this video, the teacher uses explicit systematic instruction. During the first step of explicit systematic instruction, the teacher readies the students for the lesson.
All right, boys and girls, today during math class, we are going to be adding one-digit numbers by drawing pictures. Now in the past, we've used 10 frames to help us add. Show me a thumbs up if you remember using 10 frames to help you add. See lots of thumbs up out there, lots of you remember. We've also used counters before to help us add. Show me a thumbs up if you remember using counters. See lots more thumbs up too, lots of you remember. Well, today we're going to be adding by drawing pictures. And we're going to do this because you aren't always going to have counters in your pockets or 10 frames in your backpacks to help you. So today I'm going to teach you how you can draw a picture that's going to help you add two numbers together.
During the next step, the teacher leads the students through several problems, modeling the procedures.
We're going to start with this problem here, 2 plus 4. To start, I'm going to draw dots to show my first number 2. 1, 2. Dominique, how many dots did I draw?
2.
That's right, I drew 2 dots. Next, I need to draw 4 dots. Mateo, how many dots do I need to draw next?
4.
That's right, I need to draw 4 dots. I'm going to come over here and draw 4 dots. Now I want to make sure that my picture matches the problem. So I'm going to count and make sure I have 1, 2, and then here I have 1, 2. Those dots are kind of messy. If I'm going to be drawing a picture, I need my dots to be nice and neat. So I'm going to draw my dots down below. 2, 3, 4. Now I've drawn 4 dots. My last step is to count all the dots to see how many dots I have altogether. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dots. Carlos, how many dots do I have?
6.
That's right, I have 6 dots. So I know that 2 plus 4 equals 6. Now something I want you to remember. When you're adding, sometimes you may know the answer right away, and that's awesome. Other times you may not know the answer right away. And that is one example of a time when you may want to draw a picture to help you add.
After the teacher leads students through several problems.
All right, so I'm pausing it there just to note that when the teacher was giving that first set of instruction, she's not only showing students how to do it, but she's also thinking out loud, right? So she's actually modeling that whole processing. So not just the, what's going on like outside, but which should be happening inside the kids' brains.
She then implements teacher-guided practice.
Now, I'm going to have you do the next 3 problems with a partner. I'm going to walk around the class, I'm going to answer any questions or help you as needed.
After the teacher has monitored the students during teacher-guided practice and provided corrective feedback, she asks students to complete problems independently. To ensure maintenance, the teacher plans for opportunities for ongoing practice and provides instruction for students who have not mastered the concept or procedure.
Okay, and so that is systematic explicit instruction. So it starts with you giving the objective, then there's teacher very explicit instruction on teaching it. Then there's going to be where the kids are working together, and that can happen. And that when it comes to phonics and actually, teaching students how to read and how to, sound out words and all of that, the teacher would be doing it with the kids. So it's not just the kids trying it on their own, but the teacher would do it with the kids. And then the last stage would be for the kids to do it on their own. So the teacher would literally call on, okay, hey, Johnny, can you go ahead and I want you to sound out, this word here for me. So, just keep that in mind. It's mentioned a lot in the competencies, and again, here as well as in the STR. Okay, so I'm gonna skip this one because I know we've done that here. So another thing that's going to be used to help students with comprehension is going to be working on those pre-reading activities. And so again, what a teacher needs to do is you want to make sure that you look at that prior knowledge before they actually start reading, because if students are interested in whatever it is that they're reading, they're going to pay attention, right? And so students, so students, they're going to read about things that are familiar. So teachers want to try to, figure out what students' interests are, as well as activate that background knowledge before reading. So in other words, if, they're going to read a book and a student is like, that does not look interesting to me, right? Regardless of their age. But if the teacher starts kind of talking about something that is relatable to the book, then it makes that connection so that the student is connected to like what's in that story somehow. And so the students are going to pay attention, and that's what we need them to be doing, right? And so teachers are going to probably need to spend more time with ELLs, right, your English language learners, on these pre-reading activities, because there's a lot of things that are going to have to be built. There's a lot of prior knowledge that's going to be needed in order for students to actually comprehend. So for your English language learners, it's not only working on, building the interest, so trying to make those connections with the kids, to the text, but it's also working on building their vocabulary, because they may not have the vocabulary to understand what's being said in the book, as well as to assess their understanding and kind of get a gauge as to where they're at, before you actually go into that. So, with all students, when it comes to reading, there has to be a pre-reading activity. You can't just go straight into reading the book. You got to do something to activate that prior knowledge before, and then you can go ahead and start reading. Some other things that you can do would be setting the purpose for reading. So, we're going to read this book. There's a picture of a little girl here, and she's hiding. So what do you think this book might be about, right? Let's make some predictions, or let's come up with some questions. You can link prior knowledge to new knowledge. So again, question students, so, hey, do any of you have, I don't know, do you have a jacket like this, or have you been to a place that's like this? And engage in conversations with the kids. So it's not just a matter of you saying, oh my gosh, these kids don't, they've never been, they've only lived in this little town their whole lives, they don't know anything, right? It's literally talking to the kids and trying to see if there's anything, that you can make connections to based on their knowledge base. And then there's also going to be story grammar. So the components and the structures of the story. So setting, characters, problems, and the different genres of literary tales are also going to have different components to them. So you have to expose students to those different types of stories. And you also have to talk about those components. Okay, so you can't just like go into, reading a fable, straight into like, with kindergartners, right? Because they're going to think it's real. So you have to kind of talk about, fiction and what that means, and, what a fable actually refers to. And then, of course, you have to make sure that you monitor comprehension. So notice that with all of these competencies, there is that monitoring component, right? So we have to make sure that students are, their oral language is being monitored, their fluency is being monitored, their reading comprehension is being, reading fluency and reading comprehension. So students have to be taught to monitor their own comprehension. So again, this is something that you can systematically teach. So as you are reading to the class, you would stop and check like, okay, did I, let me see if I understood this correctly, so I think this is what's happening. And so by doing that, it's going to help students to, again, teach themselves that when they're reading, they need to stop and they need to kind of assess if they're actually getting it. And so one way to assess young children, right, because like your kindergarteners, pre-K, they may not be able to, well, they can't, right? They can't write. So they're still working on that stuff. So if you ask them to actually retell you the story, that's a way for you to gauge if they actually understood. And then, so some reading strategies that you can use, again, you can activate that prior knowledge. So determine what the students are bringing to the story. And again, they're going to pay more attention if they relate to the story. And this is super important for ELLs as well as children from diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds, so that they can also bring that that information and that knowledge to the class. Okay, so this is also something important with STR, is that we want to make sure that our students are being exposed to those different ideas. And so when you ask students questions and have those conversations with the class, you know, everybody's kind of building their whole knowledge base. So these are some reading strategies that I found. You know, there's a whole bunch of other ones out there. But, you know, predicting, visualizing, inferences, important ideas, and then confirming predictions and reflecting afterwards, right? So it's more than just doing stuff before, but you're going to be doing stuff during the reading, and then you're going to be doing stuff afterwards to, you know, check for comprehension throughout. Okay, and then again, like I mentioned, right, you're going to make sure that you assess the students. So after the reading, the teacher has to talk about it. So again, it's not enough to just, you know, let's do some pre-reading activities, let's read it, and yeah, we're done. After we're done reading it, now let's talk about it. Okay, so by engaging in that, what you're doing is helping the students to, you know, verbalize what it is that they understood, but it's also helping you to see if the students actually understood, and helping you help the students understand. And so questions can be verbal or they can be written, right? Of course, it depends on the age and grade level in terms of, you know, whether you're going to have that written or not. And then there should be different types of literature used. So fiction, nonfiction, you know, fantasy. But of course, right, before you actually read those, you have to explain to students the components of that type of literature. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put you in a room again. And so again, which descriptors have we covered? And is there anything that you're gonna need to research on your own? Okay, and I'll give you 4. Okay, so I guess Lisa, what did y'all talk about? Was there anything that you needed to research?
So we basically talked about, Diane mentioned the fact that I think she said J, understanding and teaches the features of various literacy. I think that was, she said that that would be kind of a challenge only because the English language learners are going to be in one level while the other students are reading at a different level. We talked a little bit about, like, my challenge for me would probably be just, like you said, implementing something that they find interesting in order to get like their reading comprehension. So that would be my challenge, just trying to engage them into something like, oh, this is a read, or this is a fun story, or.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for sharing that. And so when it comes to that collaboration with the families, what this is more referring to is basically making sure that you're engaging with the families to try to help them so that they can help you work on the students' fluency. And so it could be, you know, where you're like, you know, you're you know, trying to maybe have like they have like literacy nights. I don't know if you've heard of those, or they have like, I know right now in my son's school, every Tuesday evening on Facebook, they have like a read aloud. And so the kids can log in and they give away prizes and stuff for them to, you know, participate and join in so that they can, you know, just kind of work on reading. And it's they'll have like a guest reader, you know, it's one of the teachers or whoever that's going to read to the kids. But that's kind of what that one is referring to. And so it doesn't really matter what in terms of where the kids are at. It's just trying to work with families to try to make sure that the kids are not only working on fluency in the classroom. So there should be some, you know, trying to get some additional help from outside. And then in terms of looking for like stuff that's interesting for the kids, when it comes to the types of text, you know, in these competencies, they want to make sure that you're using, you know, like a good books, you know, like good quality texts. And with all of those, there's always a way to make it interesting. It's just a way you have to be able to talk to the kids and try to see, you know, maybe what their interests are, and then try to like tie them in. So if you're able to engage, if you're engaging in those conversations with the students, there's a way, like there's always a way to make it interesting to the students, if that helps. Did you want to say anything else, Lisa?
No, I was just gonna ask you, Ms. Nola, was this competency number 3 or 4?
4.
Because we're looking at 4. I don't know if it should.
Please do the code.
Yes, it was. Oh shoot, I was looking at 3.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, it was 4. Mm-hmm. But yes, but same
Okay.
thing with the,
No.
yeah, with all of them, it's making sure that you're engaging with the family. Yeah.
Quick.
Okay.
Gonna die.
Sorry about that.
Good. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay. Let's see. Let me go back. All right. And it's slow. Okay, it's loading.
Word, drumroll please. Listen to this sentence. I promised not to hang by my feet. Stella Luna sighed. Stella Luna sighed. Stella Luna sighed. Say sighed. 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 Do the hand motions with us. Say sighed. Sighed. Sighed means? Sighed means. Let out a long, loud breath. Let out a long, loud breath. Say it again. Let out a long, loud breath. Say sighed. 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 What does sighed mean?
Who can read the word of the day? This one's a little bit tricky. If it tricks you, that's okay. I'll give you some clues to help you out. Chastity, go ahead. Everybody tracking the page. You don't need to track Chastity right now because you have it right in front of you.
Scarce.
Beautiful. Everybody, the word is scarce. What word?
Scarce.
Good. Chastity, please read that word for us. Not enough of something. So let me give you one example, and then you can give me all of the brilliant examples that you have. Hands down, let me give you one example. There are 24, 25 of you. If I had some pencils, and every single one of you needed one of those pencils, tracking up here, every single one of you needed those pencils, but I only had 12, then my pencils would be scarce. Or the amount of pencils that I had would be scarce because I don't have enough pencils for all of you that need a pencil. What is something else that is scarce? And some of you might be thinking about history class like DeAndre already said, which is such a brilliant connection.
Eradicate can be either something that is physically gotten rid of, so like you could eradicate an entire group of people in war, but you also could eradicate someone's feelings. So if Gabriel was really nervous about something and one of his friends did something to make him feel better, then you could say his feelings of anxiety were eradicated. They were totally gotten rid of. Trisha. Yep, demolished work. It also, though, has a little bit of a different connotation. Demolish, almost the picture is like pushing something down or crushing it. Like if you demolish a building, it's when it like falls down. This one doesn't have a fall down. It has like a wipe out, like get rid of it entirely. So it's a little different. Yeah, like a nuclear bomb would eradicate an entire civilization, technically. Let's hope not. Yes. Counteract is when something pushes back on something else. Does counteracting always eradicate?
Okay, and so as I mentioned earlier, we were going to talk about the dictionary and the thesaurus. So, like I said, when it comes to vocabulary, it is not, it shouldn't just be used as a way for students to look up the words that they don't understand. We need to make sure that we're explicitly teaching the vocabulary, but you still should be teaching students how to use a dictionary and a thesaurus. So you want to, again, explicitly teach them how to utilize it so that they can appropriately use the resource, because in their life, in their future, there is going to be a time when they are going to have to look up a word that they don't know. But when it comes to these lower grade levels, we want to make sure that we are explicitly teaching that vocabulary. And so with the use of the dictionary and the thesaurus, right, especially the thesaurus, it's also going to help to increase a student's vocabulary, because you may explicitly teach a vocabulary term and then have the students look it up in the thesaurus and they'll see other words that mean that same thing. Okay, so it's just a way to grow their vocabulary knowledge. And so when we're teaching vocabulary, we want to make sure that we are emphasizing the vocabulary, right? And we need to make sure that we're using that appropriate vocabulary so that we can build their foundation for further learning. It can be taught before the reading, or it can be taught after the reading, right? It kind of all depends on how you want to do it. If you'll notice in that very first little video clip, right, the teacher was teaching it during the reading. So she was reading, you know, a sentence, and then they hit that word that they didn't know, and that's when she taught it. So again, if you're having students read that same book, you know, 5 days out of the week, and you're, you know, teaching them that vocabulary as you're doing it, they're going to be able to comprehend what's in the text a little bit better. So again, when you're doing that vocabulary development, it should be done using pictures and other visuals. Like she did in that first video, she actually had the students, you know, do the hand movements and all of that, so that the students had a better understanding. Okay, and so we're almost out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and skip this one. But we'll go ahead and get on to our last one here, and let's see how you do with this one. So you guys kind of went back and forth, right? One won, one didn't. Okay, so with that basically brings our review for those first 5 competencies. Oops, there we go. It brings the first 5 competencies up to a close. So what I'd like for you to do is kind of go through, read through your notes, summarize any new information that you learned today, and then make a list of things that you need to study more so that you can go back. So again, this was a real quick review, right? There's a lot more information that's involved, you know, with these topics, but this was just kind of like you know, a summary, I guess, synopsis of it all. So I will be sending out a Nearpod code with a link so that you can access this self-paced in case you want to take a look at it again later. Thank you.